minus 89 degrees. On satellite images, Earth's north and south poles, the Arctic and Antarctica, look like twins, endless white deserts and miles of ice. It seems logical to think they are the same, but that is an illusion. What we are looking at are two completely different worlds. The Arctic in the north is a frozen ocean trapped between continents. Antarctica in the south is a vast isolated continent hidden beneath an ice sheet as tall as a mountain range. Each of these poles follows its own physical rules, and each is home to creatures that will never meet. So why is one side of the planet melting at a rapid pace, while the other is building up a hidden threat powerful enough to completely redraw the map of the world? And what invisible force created this global paradox? Let's find out. Imagine setting out on a journey to the farthest edges of the Earth, expecting to see the exact same picture. The endless white landscape, the freezing cold, and the vast snow-covered plains can easily fool anyone. Because of this surface-level resemblance, many people assume that the Earth's polar regions are simply mirror images of each other. But have you ever wondered why people and animals have lived in one of these places for thousands of years, while on the other, even a short walk without specialized gear can be deadly? That apparent similarity hides one of Earth's greatest geographic paradoxes. Behind the same white scenery lie two completely opposite worlds. In the Arctic, at the North Pole, there is no solid ground beneath the snow. Instead, there is a vast frozen ocean surrounded by continents on all sides, like ice floating inside a giant glass. At the South Pole, the situation is exactly the opposite. Antarctica is a massive, isolated landmass, a true continent, surrounded by the roughest and coldest waters on Earth. The interaction of these global natural systems shapes everything here, from the weather and the thickness of the ice sheet to the direction of the planet's major wind patterns. When the first explorers sailed toward Earth's southern frontier in wooden sailing ships, they expected to find a familiar landscape. They imagined gentle green tundra, herds of wild animals, and indigenous people, much like in the Arctic. Instead, they were met with a brutal surprise. Rather than welcoming shores, their ships ran into towering walls of ice that rose straight into the gray sky. The South Pole greeted them with an eerie silence, almost no signs of life, and cold so extreme it had once seemed impossible. Those mysterious ice cliffs gave rise to frightening legends. Some explorers believed they hid an entrance to a hollow Earth, while others imagined secret bases built by unknown civilizations. Today, scientists have shown that these stories were nothing more than myths, with no basis in reality. The harsh isolation of Antarctica has made it feel like another planet, and the secret behind that unsettling emptiness lies deep beneath the white surface, where the ice is so thick that it reshapes the landscape itself and pushes the laws of physics to their limits. There is even a remarkable story from the history of Antarctic exploration. Researchers once abandoned a heavy tractor on the ice. Over the following decades, it literally sank dozens of meters into the glacier and slowly drifted with the moving ice toward the ocean. Now imagine standing there yourself. Beneath your feet, the Earth's crust is bending under an unimaginable weight. Heavy machinery disappears into the ice, not because the snow is soft, but because you're standing on top of a gigantic dome of solid ice. In 1911, the legendary Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen became the first person in history to reach the South Pole, where he came face to face with this astonishing reality. Instead of a flat, low-lying landscape, his team found an endless, wind-swept plateau more than 3,000 meters above sea level. The real mystery lies in the extraordinary contrast between Earth's two poles. In the Arctic, the ice is typically only 3 or 4 meters thick, with the ocean flowing beneath it. In Antarctica, the ice sheet reaches depths of more than 4,000 meters, completely burying ancient mountain ranges and deep valleys beneath its frozen surface. What makes this even more remarkable is that the continent's immense elevation creates an environment where the familiar rules of nature begin to give way to something far more extreme. Because of its altitude, the heart of Antarctica feels like a world of high mountains, with thin air that makes every step exhausting. Here, a relentless rule takes over. Every 100 meters of elevation means lower temperatures, turning the summit of the ice sheet into the coldest place on Earth. While the Arctic is constantly warmed from below by the ocean, which acts like a giant planetary heater, Antarctica's rocky foundation is completely cut off from that source of warmth. The southern continent sits high above sea level, where the frozen ground has never known external heat. As a result, ordinary steel becomes brittle in the extreme cold, and standard diesel fuel turns into a thick, gel-like sludge. For decades, enthusiasts of alternative history embraced wild theories claiming that the immense pressure beneath the ice concealed ancient frozen cities or secret passages leading deep into the earth. Of course, scientists have long since proven that these stories are nothing more than myths. The real mystery is far more fascinating, and it lies in the behavior of the ice itself. Under the immense pressure of a 4-kilometer thick ice sheet, the ice begins to behave like a thick, viscous fluid. Near the rocky bed beneath the glacier, that enormous pressure causes parts of the ice to melt. That is why heavy machinery can slowly sink into what appears to be a solid sheet of ice, drifting toward the coast along with the moving glacier. The combination of crushing pressure and geothermal heat rising from deep within the earth creates a permanent layer of meltwater beneath the ice, forming hidden lakes and fast-moving subglacial rivers. This invisible engine keeps the entire ice sheet in constant motion, building up enormous stresses that can remain dormant for centuries before suddenly awakening and reshaping the planet's climate. High on the Antarctic ice sheet, the human mind begins to struggle as well. With no trees, no rocks, and no landmarks of any kind, the endless white landscape makes it almost impossible to judge distance or direction. But the real nightmare begins when this extreme high-altitude cold collides with the air along the coast, creating an invisible enemy. Have you ever wondered why warmth from the rest of the planet can easily reach the Arctic, yet struggles to get anywhere near Antarctica? In 1912, the surviving members of Robert Scott's British expedition came face-to-face with that mystery after becoming trapped in their tent just 11 miles from a life-saving food depot. They were defeated not simply by the cold, but by a powerful natural barrier known as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This immense ring of water flows endlessly around Antarctica, forming a nearly impenetrable wall that keeps the world's warmth at bay. This immense ring of ocean isolates the southern continent, preventing warm air masses from the equator from reaching its interior. As a result, Antarctica remains almost completely cut off from the planet's heat, locked inside a frozen fortress that warmth simply cannot penetrate. But if you think this ocean barrier is the continent's greatest challenge, the real story lies in the katabatic winds that are born deep within Antarctica itself. Dense, intensely cold air forms high on the massive ice sheet. Under its own weight, it races downhill toward the coast at incredible speeds. This constant downhill flow creates some of the most violent winds on Earth. There is even a recorded case from the history of Antarctic research stations where a sudden blast of katabatic wind flipped a heavy aircraft and dragged it across the ice. These powerful winds bend steel equipment, bury buildings under snow, and can even push tracked vehicles off balance, making the continent an incredibly hostile place to survive. Among fans of science fiction, myths still circulate claiming that these storms are artificially created. In reality, scientists have long explained the phenomenon. They are simply the result of Antarctica's extreme elevation and temperature differences. The Arctic is a completely different story. Unlike the isolated South, the North Pole has no natural barrier protecting it from the rest of the world's oceans. Warm ocean currents flow freely into the Arctic, the most famous of them being the Gulf Stream. These warm waters travel north from the tropics, pushing deep into the Arctic Ocean. As they move in, they break apart the sea ice and carry enormous amounts of heat, gradually melting the polar ice cap from below. The Arctic's remarkable exposure to the world's oceans creates a unique environment where life can thrive. While Antarctica shields itself behind a wall of wind and freezes almost everything in its path, the Arctic benefits from the warmth carried in by the surrounding seas. These two completely different climate systems have divided the planet into two worlds, one locked in permanent deep freeze, and the other constantly fighting to preserve its fragile warmth. That global climate divide sent life down two very different evolutionary paths, producing extraordinary creatures uniquely adapted to their polar homes. Yet, because of the vast temperature barriers between them, those species have never met and never will. Have you ever wondered why children's drawings so often show polar bears standing next to penguins, even though thousands of miles separate them in the real world? It's one of the world's most common misconceptions. Nature placed these animals on opposite ends of the planet for a reason. The true rulers of the Arctic are polar bears and the indigenous peoples who have successfully built their lives in the far north. Their survival is possible because of the Arctic's close connection to the surrounding continents. Since the Arctic Ocean is bordered by land, animals from northern forests can migrate into the region. Along its coast lie broad tundra landscapes rich with berries, mosses, and hardy shrubs. Every summer, the Arctic comes alive. Herds of reindeer roam the tundra, while people have relied for centuries on fishing and hunting, supported by the natural abundance of the neighboring continents. At the South Pole, however, the rules are far harsher. In 1930, the renowned American explorer Richard Byrd made a striking observation during one of his Antarctic expeditions. Hundreds of kilometers inland from the coast, there wasn't a single trace of a land mammal. Instead, Antarctica's true pioneers were an extraordinary group of birds, penguins. These birds were able to evolve and spread across the Antarctic coastline because the most isolated continent on Earth had no land predators. With nothing to fear on shore, penguins gradually lost the ability to fly, trading their wings for powerful flippers that made them exceptional hunters in the fish-rich Southern Ocean. Between the Arctic and Antarctica lies an invisible thermal barrier, the equator. Neither polar bears nor penguins can naturally cross it. If a polar bear somehow reached Antarctica, it would devastate defenseless penguin colonies in a matter of moments. But the continent's extreme isolation has protected this unique world for millions of years. Even today, the internet is filled with myths claiming that Antarctica hides giant mutated monsters or dinosaurs frozen beneath the ice since prehistoric times. Of course, these are nothing more than works of fiction and conspiracy theories. No large animal, let alone a human, could survive deep inside Antarctica without food or warmth. But there is hidden life at the poles. You just have to look beneath the water and the ice. The underwater ecosystems at Earth's two poles are dramatically different because of their temperatures and ocean currents. In the Arctic, giant whales swim beneath the sea ice alongside vast schools of cod. In Antarctica, the seafloor is dominated by enormous swarms of Antarctic krill and remarkable transparent fish whose blood contains natural antifreeze proteins instead of the compounds found in most other fish. This profound biological divide has turned the two polar regions into separate evolutionary laboratories. Arctic animals evolved to migrate constantly between the frozen ocean and the living tundra, following the seasons and escaping winter hunger. The creatures of Antarctica are permanently confined to the narrow strip of coastline, beyond which lies an endless frozen desert. While biologists continue to marvel at the resilience of these remarkable animals, geologists are captivated by something even more extraordinary. Because Antarctica's greatest secret doesn't lie on its surface, but deep beneath it. Imagine falling into a pitch-black world that has been completely sealed off from sunlight for millions of years. That is exactly what scientists encountered when they began searching for hidden lakes buried beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. In 1996, an international team of researchers officially confirmed the existence of Lake Vostok, a gigantic body of water hidden beneath nearly 4 kilometers of solid ice. The most astonishing part is that the lake remains liquid. The immense pressure of the overlying ice, combined with a small amount of geothermal heat rising from deep inside the Earth, keeps the water from freezing. Scientists have already recovered evidence of unique bacteria that somehow survive in complete darkness without oxygen. But how can eternal cold and underground fire exist in the same place? As unbelievable as it sounds, Antarctica is geologically active beneath its blanket of ice. Hidden below the ice sheet are dozens of volcanic hotspots and even active volcanoes that warm the continent from below. This extraordinary contrast between the extreme cold at the surface and molten rock deep underground creates enormous stresses within the ice. Near the rocky bed, the glacier begins to melt, forming vast underground cavities hidden beneath the frozen continent. Along these hidden pathways, enormous masses of ice slowly flow toward the ocean. Among conspiracy theorists and fans of alternative history, stories still circulate claiming that these warm subglacial caverns hide secret military bunkers or abandoned German laboratories from the last century. Of course, None of these tales are supported by any credible evidence. But the deep interior of Antarctica does hold something genuinely unsettling. People can completely lose their sense of direction there. In the endless white emptiness, explorers often find that even their navigation systems become unreliable. A standard magnetic compass is virtually useless near the pole. Because the Earth's magnetic field lines point almost straight downward, the needle loses its horizontal alignment and can no longer indicate a reliable direction. With no mountains, trees, or other landmarks in sight, researchers can also experience disturbing visual and auditory illusions. This strange combination of magnetic anomalies and geothermal activity makes Antarctica one of the most unpredictable places on Earth. While scientists in the Arctic can study the floor of an open ocean from research vessels, those working in Antarctica must drill through kilometers of ancient ice just to uncover the continent's secrets. The vast hidden caverns and buried lakes are a reminder that we still know surprisingly little about what lies beneath this frozen giant. And today, those mysterious processes deep below the ice are beginning to reveal themselves, contributing to a global imbalance that is already reshaping the world around us. Have you ever wondered why the news is constantly warning us about melting polar ice, yet the two poles are responding in completely different ways? That is where the greatest and most fascinating mystery begins. At the northern edge of the planet, Arctic sea ice is disappearing at an alarming rate, exposing dark ocean waters and opening new shipping routes across the polar seas. In 2012, scientists recorded the smallest Arctic sea ice extent ever observed, confirming just how rapidly the region was changing. Antarctica, however, has played a far more deceptive game. For many years, its vast central ice sheet appeared almost unchanged. Thanks to its immense elevation and powerful barrier of frigid winds, the heart of the continent still maintains extremely low temperatures, giving the impression that everything is stable. But beneath that calm exterior lies a far more dangerous process. Scientists discovered that the real threat is concentrated along Antarctica's coastline. The massive ice shelves that extend out over the ocean act like enormous natural dams. They hold back the colossal ice sheet resting on the continent's rocky foundation, preventing it from sliding into the sea under its own immense weight. If warmer ocean water weakens and destroys these floating barriers, the enormous mass of inland ice will begin flowing freely into the ocean. Once that process starts, it could trigger a self-sustaining chain reaction that humanity would have no way of stopping. In 2020, Antarctica gave climate scientists a stark warning when a gigantic iceberg, roughly the size of a small country, broke away from the continent. The internet is full of alarming claims that melting polar ice will trigger a global flood within hours or drown entire continents beneath the sea. Of course, those are dramatic exaggerations. Polar ice simply cannot melt that quickly. But the real future of Earth's climate is still giving scientists serious cause for concern. If the delicate balance between the rapidly changing Arctic and the awakening Antarctic ice sheet is disrupted, global sea levels could rise by several meters. That would reshape coastlines around the world, threaten the infrastructure of major coastal cities, and force a massive reorganization of global shipping and trade. Such a climate shift would transform life across the planet. Ocean currents would change, weather patterns would shift, and the effects would be felt far beyond the polar regions. For millions of years, these two opposite worlds at the ends of the Earth have helped keep our planet in balance. Now, both are entering a period of profound and unpredictable change. While the Arctic is gradually becoming an open, navigable ocean, Antarctica continues to store an immense hidden force, one that could one day remind humanity just how powerful nature truly is. The frozen wilderness of the South is no longer standing still, and whatever comes next may become one of the defining events in the history of our civilization.